I'm Abigail, 32, and I always thought Thanksgiving was my safe haven. Driving home to our Virginia house, I pictured Nathan's warm smile, our table set with pecan pie and laughter filling the air. But when I opened the door, the house was silent. No decorations, just a creaking rocking chair. Nathan's stepfather, Harold, sat there staring. A note on the table read, "Gone on a cruise with my ex. Stay home and take care of Stepdad. He needs you." Harold opened one eye and said, "Shall we begin?" I nodded, heart sinking. Have you ever walked into a moment that broke your world? Where are you watching from? Like and subscribe to hear how I faced this betrayal. My hands shook as I held Nathan's note, the words blurring through tears. I stood in our kitchen, the silence louder than any argument we'd ever had. The fridge hummed, but there was no warmth, no smell of roasting turkey, just the faint dust of a house left behind. I grabbed my phone and dialed Nathan. Straight to voicemail. His voice, so familiar, felt like a stranger's now. I tried again, then a third time, my thumb hovering over the screen, willing him to pick up. Nothing. I sank into a chair, the note crumpling in my fist. Rachel. His ex. The name burned, conjuring her sharp laugh from that company picnic 2 summers ago. I'd caught Nathan glancing at her, his eyes lingering too long. He'd brushed it off, said it was just catching up. Work stuff. I'd believed him, or maybe I'd wanted to. Now the memory twisted like a knife. Harold's chair creaked from the living room. He hadn't moved since I'd walked in, his presence like a weight in the house. I wiped my eyes and stood, needing to do something, anything to keep from falling apart. The kitchen counter was bare. No groceries, no sign of the holiday I'd planned. Harold cleared his throat loud enough to pull me back. "You going to cook something, or are we starving tonight?" He called, his voice gravelly, unbothered. I froze, gripping the counter. Cook, my husband, was gone, and this man, this stranger who'd never liked me, expected dinner like it was any other day. I wanted to scream to tell him to leave, but my voice caught. Instead, I opened the pantry, my hands moving on autopilot. A bag of potatoes, some canned beans, a half-empty box of pasta. Barely enough for a meal. "I'm not your maid, Harold," I said louder than I meant, my voice cracking. He chuckled low and dry. "Never said you were. But Nathan's not here and I'm hungry. You want answers? Start with what's in front of you." Answers. I turned, staring at him through the doorway. He was leaning back, one hand resting on that old pocket watch he always carried, its ticking sharp in the quiet. His eyes met mine, steady, like he knew something I didn't. "What do you know about this?" I asked, holding up the crumpled note. "About Nathan and Rachel," Harold shrugged, maddeningly calm. "More than you, probably. He's always been weak for her, same as his mother was for her own mistakes." My stomach twisted. Diane, Nathan's mother, had been gone for years, but Harold's tone carried a bitterness I'd never heard before. I wanted to press him to demand what he meant, but the weight of the day pressed harder. I turned back to the potatoes, slicing them with too much force, the knife slipping and nicking my finger. A bead of blood welled up, and I cursed under my breath, rinsing it under cold water. The front door rattled, and for a second, my heart leapt, thinking it was Nathan. But it was just Joyce, our neighbor, balancing a casserole dish in her arms. Her gray hair was pulled back, her smile hesitant as she stepped inside. "Thought you might need this," she said, setting the dish on the counter. "Saw Nathan's car gone. Everything okay?" I forced a smile, my throat tight. "Just a mix-up," I lied. "Thanks for the food." Joyce glanced at Harold, her eyes narrowing slightly. She leaned closer, her voice dropping. "He's been wandering at night, you know, talking to himself. Be careful, Abigail." I nodded, unsure what to say. Joyce patted my arm and left, her footsteps fading into the evening. Harold's chair creaked again, and I felt his gaze on me, heavy, waiting. I tossed the potatoes into a pan, the sizzle filling the silence, but my mind was racing. Rachel's laugh, Nathan's lies, Harold's cryptic words, and now Joyce's warning. I found a letter tucked under a placemat, the handwriting, Allison's, Nathan's sister. My hands trembled as I opened it. "Harold's not right," it read. "He plays games, manipulates people. Watch yourself." I stuffed it into my pocket, my pulse quickening. The potatoes burned the smoke, stinging my eyes, but I didn't care. Harold knew something, and I was stuck here cooking for a man who seemed to hold all the pieces to my broken life. The smoke from the burned potatoes curled upward, and I yanked the pan off the stove, my hands unsteady. Harold's chair stopped creaking, and I felt him watching me, his silence louder than any words. I dumped the ruined food into the sink, the clatter of the pan echoing in the empty house. My chest tightened, Allison's letter burning a hole in my pocket. I wanted to confront Harold, to shake him until he spilled whatever he was hiding, but something in his steady gaze held me back. I grabbed Joyce's casserole and carried it to the dining room, avoiding his eyes. The table was set for two, the plates chipped from years of use, a reminder of dinners with Nathan when we'd talk about our future. Now it felt like a stage for someone else's play. I scooped out portions, the cheesy smell turning my stomach. Harold settled at the head of the table, unfolding a napkin with deliberate care. "You going to sit?" he asked, his voice low, almost taunting. "Or you planning to run off like he did?" I froze, the serving spoon hovering. The jab landed hard, cutting through the fog of my anger. I sat gripping my fork and forced myself to meet his eyes. They were sharp, not cruel, but searching, like he was testing me. "Why are you even here, Harold?" I asked, my voice quieter than I wanted. "If Nathan's gone, why stay?" He took a slow bite, chewing as if he hadn't heard me. Then he leaned back, his fingers tapping that pocket watch again. Its ticking filled the room, steady, relentless. "Diane used to ask me that," he said finally. "Why I stayed? Guess I'm just stubborn. Or maybe I like watching people figure out what they're made of." His words hung heavy, and I pushed my plate away, appetite gone. Diane's name kept coming up like a ghost neither of us could shake. I thought of the photo I'd seen in his book, her smile so like Nathan's. What did Harold mean about her mistakes? And why did it feel like he was tying me to her story? I stood needing air and stepped onto the back porch. The November chill bit at my skin, the yard dark, except for a faint glow from the shed. I wrapped my arms around myself, Allison's warning replaying in my mind. Manipulative games. I pulled out my phone and texted her, my fingers stiff. "What do you know about Harold?" "Why didn't you tell me about Nathan?" Her reply came fast, 3 dots blinking before the words appeared. "I didn't want to hurt you. Harold's dangerous. He twists people. Call me tomorrow." I stared at the screen, my breath catching. Dangerous. The word didn't fit the old man eating casserole inside, but it gnawed at me, stirring a restless fear. I paced the porch, the wooden boards creaking under my boots. The shed's light flickered, and I stopped squinting. Was someone out there? I shook my head, blaming the stress, but the unease clung. Back inside, Harold was still at the table, his plate clean. He looked up, his expression unreadable. "You're stronger than you think, Abigail," he said, almost soft. "But you're not ready for the truth yet." "What truth?" I snapped, my voice rising. "Stop talking in riddles. If you know something about Nathan, tell me." He stood slower than before and shuffled toward the stairs. "Tomorrow," he said, not turning. "Bring that key I gave you. Attic's got answers if you're brave enough." I watched him climb each step, deliberate, until he disappeared. The key he'd handed me earlier sat heavy in my pocket next to Allison's letter. My pulse raced, a mix of dread and curiosity. The attic. Whatever was up there, it was tied to Nathan, to Rachel, maybe even to Diane. I sank onto the couch, the house settling around me, its quiet no longer empty, but alive with secrets I wasn't sure I wanted to face. I clutched the key Harold gave me, its edges biting into my palm as I stood at the base of the attic stairs. The house was still the kind of quiet that presses against your ears, broken only by the faint tick of Harold's watch from downstairs. Last night's conversation churned in my mind, his cryptic promise of answers fueling a restless anger. I needed to know what Nathan had done, why he'd chosen Rachel, and what Harold was hiding. My boots thudded on the creaky steps, each one heavier than the last. The attic door was warped, paint peeling like old skin. I turned the key, the lock grinding before it gave way. Dust swirled as I pushed it open, the air thick with mildew, and something sharper like regret. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, casting shadows over stacks of boxes and forgotten furniture. I stepped inside, my heart pounding, and spotted a trunk in the corner, its leather cracked but sturdy. Nathan's handwriting was scrawled on a label, "Personal." I knelt, my fingers trembling as I opened it. Inside were journals, their pages yellowed, some dog-eared. I picked one up, dated a year ago, and started reading. Nathan's words hit like punches. "Reconnected with Rachel today. She gets me in ways Abigail never will." My throat tightened, tears pricking my eyes. Another entry, "Cruise booked. Rachel's thrilled. Abigail will never suspect." I slammed the journal shut, my breath ragged. He'd planned this for months, laughing behind my back while I planned our holiday. I dug deeper, finding a photo of them together, Rachel's arm around Nathan, both smiling on a beach. It wasn't old. His haircut was recent, the one I'd teased him about. My chest burned, a mix of rage and shame. How had I been so blind? I'd cooked for him, loved him, built a life, and he'd been writing love notes to her. I wanted to tear the photo, to rip every page, but I kept reading, each word a fresh cut. Footsteps creaked behind me. I spun, heart racing, to see Harold leaning against the doorframe, his face half lit by the bulb. "Found what you were looking for?" he asked, his voice calm, almost amused. "You knew," I spat, standing the journal still in my hand. "You knew he was planning this, and you let me walk into it." Harold shrugged, stepping closer, his mismatched shoes scuffing the floor. "Nathan's his mother's son. Weak. Always chasing what he can't have. Diane did the same, running off when things got hard." I flinched at Diane's name, the comparison stinging. "Don't put this on me," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm not her. I didn't deserve this." "Nobody deserves it," he said, his eyes narrowing. "But you're here, aren't you? Still standing. That's more than Diane ever did." His words twisted something inside me, anger flaring hotter. I shoved the journal back into the trunk, my hands shaking. "There's a box up here," I said, pointing to a small locked one in the corner engraved with Diane's initials. "You told me it has answers. Open it." Harold's face tightened just for a second before he smoothed it over. "Not yet," he said, turning away. "Some things you're not ready to carry." I grabbed his arm, surprising myself with the force. "Stop playing games," I snapped. "I'm done being your pawn. Tell me what's in it, or I'm breaking it open." He pulled free, his eyes cold now, and for the first time I saw something like fear in them. "You want truth," he said, voice low. "Be careful. It's heavier than you think." He walked out, leaving me alone with the trunk and a rage that felt like it could burn the house down. I stood frozen in the attic, Harold's footsteps fading down the stairs, his warning ringing in my ears. The locked box sat in the corner, its engraved initials taunting me, but my hands wouldn't move. My anger churned, mixed with a sickening dread that whatever was inside would break me further. I sank to the floor, the cold boards biting through my jeans, and pulled my phone from my pocket. Allison's text from last night stared back, her words about Harold's danger now feeling like a noose tightening. I typed a new message, my fingers clumsy. "Call me now. I need to know everything." I hit send and waited, the attic's silence pressing harder. No reply. I scrolled through my contacts, landing on Nathan's name, and before I could stop myself, I called again. Voicemail, his voice bright and careless, like the man I'd married. I hung up, my throat burning, and opened my photos, swiping to a picture from our last anniversary. Nathan's arm around me, his smile wide. Had it all been a lie? A faint hum drifted up from below, that same eerie tune Harold had sung over dinner. It clawed at me, pulling up memories of Nathan whistling it absent-mindedly while fixing his car. I shoved the phone away, my breath hitching. The attic felt smaller now, the walls leaning in, and I stumbled to a pile of Nathan's old clothes folded neatly in a crate. I grabbed a flannel shirt, the one he'd worn on our first date, and pressed it to my face. It smelled of him, cedar and soap, and for a moment I could pretend he was downstairs waiting for me. But he wasn't. He was with Rachel on a cruise, living a life he'd chosen over ours. I threw the shirt down, my hands shaking, and kicked the crate, sending it toppling. Papers spilled out, and among them a folded note in unfamiliar handwriting caught my eye. I knelt unfolding it, and my heart stopped. It was from Rachel, dated 3 months ago. "Thanks for the late-night talks, Nate. You're right, Abigail's too stuck in her routine. We're better together. Love R." I read it again, each word carving deeper. Late-night talks. He'd been in our bed texting her while I slept beside him. My vision blurred, tears spilling as I crumpled the note. I wanted to burn every trace of him, but the pain held me there, heavy and unyielding. I thought of our mornings together, me making coffee while he read the paper, and how he'd kiss my forehead before work. Had he been thinking of her then, planning this betrayal while I planned our future? The hum stopped, and a new sound came from the attic's far corner, a faint click like a button pressed. I wiped my face, my pulse spiking, and crept toward it. A small, dusty tape recorder sat on a shelf, its play button worn smooth. I hesitated, then pressed it, and a woman's voice crackled through, soft but desperate. "Harold, I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. Please forgive me." It was Diane, her words trembling, and the tape looped, repeating her plea. I backed away, my stomach twisting. Why was this here? What had Diane done to Harold, and why was I caught in their ghosts? My phone buzzed. Allison's name flashing, and I answered, my voice raw. "What's going on?" I demanded. "What's Harold hiding?" Her voice was hushed, urgent. "Abigail Nathan took my money for that cruise. Said it was for you, a surprise. I just found out it was for Rachel. Harold's been pushing him, I think. He's got this hold over people. I'm coming tomorrow, but don't trust him." I hung up, my head spinning. Nathan had lied to Allison too, used her money to run off with Rachel, and Harold was at the center of it, pulling strings I couldn't see. I grabbed the tape recorder, my hands shaking, and stared at the locked box. Whatever Harold was hiding, it was tied to Diane, to Nathan, to me. I needed answers, but the shed meeting he'd mentioned last night loomed, and the thought of facing him there alone in the dark made my skin crawl. The shed door groaned as I pushed it open, the night air sharp against my face. My flashlight beam cut through the dark landing on Harold, who stood by a workbench, his silhouette hunched but steady. The locked box from the attic sat in front of him, its engraved initials catching the light. My heart pounded, Allison's warning about Nathan's lies and Harold's schemes clawing at me. I gripped the tape recorder I'd found, Diane's voice still looping in my mind, and stepped inside, the smell of rust and damp wood choking the air. "You're late," Harold said, not looking up. His voice was flat, but his hands twitched, betraying something nervous. "I'm here now," I said, my voice sharper than I meant. "Open the box, Harold. You said it has answers. I'm done with your games." He turned, his eyes glinting under the flashlight's glow, and for a moment I saw not the gruff old man, but someone carrying a lifetime of scars. He tapped the box, almost gentle. "You think you want this, Abigail. But Nathan's not the only one who's been lying to himself." My stomach dropped. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, stepping closer, the recorder heavy in my pocket. "Just tell me what you know about him and Rachel." Harold laughed, a low, bitter sound that made my skin prickle. "Oh, I know plenty. Called me from the ship yesterday, bragging about how he's finally free. Said you were too predictable, too safe. Rachel's his spark, always was." He laughed, Abigail. "Laughed about leaving you here with me." The words hit like a fist, knocking the air from my lungs. I stumbled back, the flashlight shaking in my hand, its beam dancing across the shed's walls. Nathan had laughed. I saw his face in my mind, the way he'd grin when we'd dance in the kitchen. And now I imagined that same grin twisted, mocking me while he sailed away with her. My chest burned, tears welling, but I swallowed them, refusing to break in front of Harold. "You're lying," I said, my voice cracking. He wouldn't say that. Wouldn't he? Harold stepped closer, his mismatched shoes crunching on the dirt floor. "I've known that boy his whole life. He's weak, just like Diane. I stayed in this family to see if anyone could prove me wrong. You're here because I wanted to see what you're made of." I froze, his words sinking in. "See what I'm made of," I repeated, my voice rising. "You set this up. You wanted me stuck here dealing with your cryptic nonsense while Nathan ran off." Harold's face hardened, but he didn't answer. Instead, he pulled a small key from his pocket and slid it into the box's lock. My pulse raced, a mix of dread and need to know. He paused, looking at me, his eyes softer now, almost pitying. "This is your last chance to walk away," he said. "Once you see this, there's no going back." I shook my head, my hands clenched. "Open it," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. He turned the key, the lock clicking open. But before he could lift the lid, headlights flashed through the shed's window and a car door slammed outside. I spun, my heart in my throat, as Allison's voice called out, "Abigail, are you in there?" She burst through the door, her face pale, hair tangled from the drive. Her eyes locked on Harold, then the box, and she grabbed my arm, pulling me back. "Don't let him do this," she said, her voice shaking. "He's been playing us all." He pushed Nathan to leave, told him you'd never fight back. I yanked my arm free, my head spinning. What I looked at Harold, his face unreadable, the box still unopened between us. "You told Nathan to leave me." Harold didn't flinch, but his silence was answer enough. Allison's voice cut through, sharp and desperate. "I found texts on Nathan's old phone. Harold's been feeding him lies for months, saying you were holding him back. He wanted to hurt you, Abigail, to prove some twisted point." My knees buckled and I gripped the workbench, the world tilting. Harold, the man I'd cooked for, sat across from, had orchestrated this. My pain, Nathan's betrayal, all part of his test. I stared at the box, its contents still hidden, and felt something snap inside me, a rage so raw I could barely breathe. Allison's words hung in the shed, sharp and heavy, as I stared at Harold, his hands still on the box's lid. My rage boiled, but beneath it a hollow ache spread, like my heart was cracking open. The air felt thick, the shed's walls closing, and every creak and rustle amplifying the chaos inside me. I stepped forward, my voice trembling but loud. "Open it, Harold. Now. If you've been pulling strings, I deserve to know everything." Harold's jaw tightened, but he lifted the lid, slow and deliberate. Inside were letters, dozens of them tied with a faded ribbon. He pulled one out, his fingers unsteady, and handed it to me. Diane's handwriting sprawled across the page, dated 20 years ago. I scanned it, my breath catching. "Harold, I'm leaving. I've been with someone else. You'll never understand, but I can't stay. I'm sorry." The words blurred as my eyes burned, not from tears, but from a fury I couldn't name. I looked up, my voice shaking. "What does this have to do with me? With Nathan?" Harold's eyes met mine, cold but flickering with something raw. "Diane broke me," he said, his voice low. "I raised Nathan, watched him grow into her, chasing dreams that ruin everyone else. I told him you'd hold him back, that Rachel was his way out. I wanted to see if you'd crumble like she did, or if you'd fight." Allison gasped, her hand covering her mouth, but I barely heard her. My vision narrowed, Harold's face the only thing clear. "You pushed him to Rachel," I whispered, my voice breaking. "You made him think I wasn't enough, just to test me." He nodded, unapologetic. "You're stronger than Diane, but you needed to prove it. Nathan's choice was his own, but I gave him the nudge." I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat, and lunged for the letters, snatching them from the box. They scattered across the dirt floor, pages of Diane's confessions, her betrayal, her shame. I grabbed another, reading aloud, my voice hoarse. "I loved him, Harold, but I couldn't stop." It was like Diane was speaking through me, her guilt mirroring my pain, and I hated her, hated Harold, hated Nathan for making me feel this small. Allison grabbed my shoulders, trying to pull me back, but I shook her off, my hands full of crumpled paper. "You're sick," I shouted at Harold. "You didn't just ruin Nathan. You broke me for what? Some twisted revenge on a woman who's been dead for years." Harold didn't move, his face carved from stone. "You're still standing," he said, almost a whisper. "That's the point." I threw the letters at him, pages fluttering like wounded birds, and stumbled back, my chest heaving. Allison's voice cut through, sharp and desperate. "I found more, Abigail. Nathan's text to Harold, planning this months ago. He said he wanted to hurt you, to make you feel what he felt when Mom left." My knees buckled and I caught myself on the workbench, the world spinning. Nathan wanted to hurt me. Not just leave, but punish. I saw our wedding day, his vows, the way he'd held my hand, and now I saw the truth. Every promise was laced with resentment, every touch a lie. My fingers dug into the wood, splintering under my nails, as Allison kept talking, her words a blur. Harold had told Nathan I was like Diane, that I'd trap him, that Rachel was his freedom. I sank to the floor, the dirt cold against my palms, and stared at the scattered letters. Diane's betrayal, Harold's manipulation, Nathan's cruelty, they wove together a tapestry of pain with me at the center. I wanted to scream again, to break something, but my body felt empty, like I'd poured out everything I had. The shed was silent. Harold's watch ticking faintly, and I looked up at him, at Allison, at the box, feeling like I'd been hollowed out with nothing left but the weight of their truths. The shed's dirt floor clung to my palms as I pushed myself up, my breath ragged but steadying. Allison's hand hovered near my shoulder, her eyes wide with worry, but I waved her off. Harold stood by the workbench, the scattered letters at his feet, his face a mask of resignation. The weight of their truths, Nathan's cruelty, Harold's manipulation, Diane's betrayal pressed against me. But something shifted inside, a spark of resolve cutting through the haze. I wasn't going to be their pawn anymore. "I'm done here," I said, my voice low but firm, dusting my hands on my jeans. "Harold, you don't get to decide what I'm made of. And Nathan doesn't get to break me." Harold's eyes flickered, but he said nothing, his fingers tightening around his watch. Allison stepped forward, her voice soft. "Abigail, let's go inside. We'll figure this out together." "No," I said, sharper than I meant. "I need to see him. Nathan, I'm not waiting for him to come back and spin more lies." Allison frowned, glancing at the open box. "You mean confront him?" "He's on a cruise, Abigail. You can't just—" I cut in, my pulse quickening. He wrote about the cruise in his journal. Port details, dates, everything. I'm going to find him. I turned and walked out of the shed, the night air cool against my flushed skin. Allison followed, her footsteps crunching behind me, but I didn't slow down. The house loomed ahead. Its windows dark, and I pushed through the back door, heading straight for the attic stairs. My boots pounded the steps, each one fueling the fire building inside me. I wasn't running away. I was choosing to face the man who'd laughed at my pain. In the attic, I dug through Nathan's trunk, pulling out the journal I'd read earlier. My hands were steady now, flipping to the page with the cruise itinerary. Miami tomorrow at noon, the ship docking for a day. I grabbed my phone, opened a travel app, and searched for flights. A red-eye leaving Richmond at dawn would get me there in time. I booked it without hesitating, the confirmation chime grounding me. Allison appeared at the attic door, her arms crossed. "This is crazy," she said, her voice tight. "You're going to fly across the country to confront him. What if he just laughs again?" "Then I'll know," I said, zipping my bag after tossing in the journal. "I'll know I looked him in the eye and didn't let him define me." She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "What about Harold?" "He's not well, Abigail. Joyce said he's been coughing blood. He's downstairs begging you to stay, saying he needs to make things right before it's too late." I paused, the bag strap heavy on my shoulder. Harold's plea tugged at me, his shadowed eyes flashing in my mind. Part of me wanted to hear him out, to understand why he'd twisted our lives, but the spark inside me burned brighter. He'd had his chance. "I'm not his redemption," I said, my voice steady. "Joyce can handle him. I need this for me." Allison nodded, her expression softening. "Okay, but I'm driving you to the airport. You're not doing this alone." I managed a small smile, the first in days, and headed downstairs. In the living room, Harold sat in his rocking chair, his face pale, a glass of water trembling in his hand. He looked up, his voice hoarse. "Don't go, Abigail. I'm not long for this world. Let me explain." I stopped, my heart twisting, but I shook my head. "You've explained enough, Harold. This isn't about you anymore." I walked out, Allison behind me, and as I stepped into the chilly dawn, the weight of the house lifted. I was moving, not running, and for the first time since I'd found that note, I felt a quiet strength rising, ready to face whatever waited at the port. The airport terminal buzzed around me, a blur of rolling suitcases and hurried voices, but I felt anchored, my resolve a quiet pulse beneath the chaos. Allison sat beside me at the gate, her knee bouncing as she sipped coffee, but I kept my eyes on the journal in my lap. Nathan's cruise details underlined in my shaky handwriting. The red-eye flight loomed just an hour away, and with every passing minute, I felt the weight of what I was about to do settle deeper. This wasn't just about confronting Nathan. It was about reclaiming the part of me he'd tried to erase. "You sure about this?" Allison asked, her voice low, cutting through the terminal's hum. "You don't owe him anything you know." I nodded, tracing the journal's edge with my thumb. "I owe myself," I said, my voice steady. "I need to see his face when I say I'm done. Not for him, for me." She leaned back, her expression a mix of worry and pride, and handed me a small paper bag from the gift shop. "Open it," she said. "You'll need something to hold on to out there." I pulled out a silver necklace, simple but striking, with a pendant shaped like my initials, AW. The metal was cool against my fingers, and I slipped it on the weight, grounding me. "It's perfect," I said, my throat tightening. "Thanks, Allison." She shrugged, but her eyes softened. "Just don't let him dull your shine, okay?" I smiled, clutching the pendant, and boarded the plane, the journal tucked in my carry-on. The flight was a blur of engine hum and dim lights, my mind racing through what I'd say to Nathan. No tears, no begging, just the truth I was worth more than his betrayal. I rehearsed the words, each one sharpening the strength I'd felt leaving the house. By the time we landed in Miami, the morning sun glaring through the terminal windows, I was ready. Allison had texted me a rental car confirmation, her way of making sure I didn't back out. I drove to the port, the journal open on the passenger seat, my hands steady on the wheel. The docks were alive with tourists and crew, the cruise ship towering against the sky, its white hull gleaming. I parked and stepped out, the salty air sharp in my lungs, and scanned the crowd. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from a clarity I hadn't felt in days. I spotted them near the gangway, Nathan's laugh carrying over the chatter, Rachel's hand on his arm. He wore a bright shirt. I'd never seen his hair tousled by the breeze, and she was all confidence, her sunglasses perched like a crown. My stomach twisted, but I straightened the necklace cool against my collarbone and walked toward them. Every step felt like shedding the weight of his lies, the years I'd spent trying to be enough. Nathan saw me first, his laugh dyeing his face, paling as if he'd seen a ghost. Rachel turned, her smirk faltering for a split second before she recovered, tilting her head. "Well, this is unexpected," she said, her voice dripping with amusement. Nathan opened his mouth, but no words came, his eyes darting between me and the ship like he could escape. I stopped a few feet away, my hands loose at my sides, and looked at him shilly while I looked. The man I'd loved was gone, replaced by someone small, caught in his own choices. "Abigail," he finally said, his voice weak. "What are you doing here?" I didn't answer, not yet. I let the silence stretch, my gaze steady, the pendant's weight a reminder of who I was becoming. In that moment, I wasn't the woman he'd laughed about, the one Harold had tested. I was Abigail, and I was enough. I took a slow breath, my voice ready, and stepped closer, the words I'd rehearsed burning bright, waiting for the right moment to cut through his world. The port's noise faded as I stood before Nathan, my silence louder than the crowd's chatter. His eyes darted, searching for an escape, while Rachel's smirk wavered, her fingers tightening on his arm. The necklace Allison gave me rested cool against my skin, a quiet anchor. I took a breath, my voice steady but low, each word deliberate. "Nathan, I'm not here to beg. I came to tell you I'm done. You chose this, and I'm choosing myself." Nathan blinked, his mouth opening then closing like a fish caught on a line. Rachel laughed sharp and forced, stepping forward. "Oh, please, Abigail. You're embarrassing yourself. He's moved on. Go home." I didn't flinch, my gaze locked on Nathan, ignoring her. His face crumpled, a flicker of shame crossing it, but he said nothing, his silence cutting deeper than any excuse. I expected anger, maybe tears, but this quiet defeat was worse, a mirror of the man he'd become. My chest tightened, not with pain, but with a strange clarity. I'd been holding on to someone who didn't exist. Allison's text buzzed in my pocket, but I didn't check it, my focus unbroken. Rachel's voice rose, her confidence cracking. You think this changes anything Nathan wanted out? You were suffocating him, always so perfect, so boring. Her words stung, but they didn't land like they would have days ago. I turned to her, my voice calm, almost soft. You're not my problem, Rachel. You're his. Good luck with that. She froze, her lips parting, but no retort came. Nathan's head dropped, his hands shoved into his pockets, and the crowd around us seemed to still their murmurs, a distant hum. I felt their eyes, strangers witnessing my unraveling life, but I stood taller, the pendant's weight steadying me. I'd come to confront him, but this wasn't about winning. It was about letting go. I turned to walk away, my boots steady on the pavement, when Nathan's voice broke through, small and unsteady. Abigail, wait. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I stopped, not turning my back to him. His words hung there weak, and I waited, expecting more, an apology, a plea, but only silence followed. My heart thudded, not with hope, but with the finality of it all. I kept walking, the port's noise swelling again, swallowing his voice. The rental car waited, its door warm under my hand, and I slid inside, my hands gripping the wheel. My phone buzzed again, Allison's name flashing. I answered, my voice flat. I saw him. It's over. Her breath caught relief and worry mixing. You okay? She asked. Joyce just called. Harold's in the hospital. It's bad. I stared through the windshield, the ship's silhouette blurring in the heat. Harold's pale face from that morning flashed in my mind, his plea to stay, his trembling hands. Part of me wanted to feel something, pity, anger, but all I felt was a heavy stillness, like the world was holding its breath. Nathan's silence, Rachel's venom, Harold's collapse. They were pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve anymore. I started the engine, the hum grounding me, and drove toward the airport, my heart a quiet ache, frozen in the aftermath of what I'd done. The highway stretched before me, Miami's skyline fading in the rear view as I drove back to the airport. The rental car's hum, a steady pulse against my thoughts. Allison's voice lingered from the call, her words about Harold's hospital stay sinking in slow, like rain soaking dry ground. I kept one hand on the wheel, the other brushing the necklace at my throat, its pendant a faint reminder of the woman I was trying to become. But the quiet in the car wasn't peace. It was a heavy, unyielding weight, carrying Nathan's silence, Rachel's sneer, and now Harold's collapse. Back in Virginia, the hospital's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. As I stepped into Harold's room, the antiseptic smell sharp in my nose. Joy sat by his bed, her knitting needles clicking softly, her face drawn but calm. Harold lay propped on pillows, his skin gray, an oxygen tube snaking under his nose. His eyes fluttered open, finding mine, and for a moment I saw the man from the shed, his sharp gaze dulled now, almost pleading. You came, he rasped, his voice barely above a whisper, each word a struggle. Didn't think you would. I stood at the foot of the bed. My arms crossed, the necklace cool against my skin. Joyce glanced up, her needles pausing, and gave a small nod, like she understood the storm I was holding back. I didn't want to be here, I said, my voice low, measured. But I needed to see you, to understand why you did this to me. Harold's chest heaved, a cough rattling through him, and Joyce reached for a glass of water, but he waved her off. His eyes stayed on me, softer than I'd ever seen. I was wrong, he said, pausing to breathe. Wanted to break you to see if you'd fall like Diane. But you didn't. I'm sorry, Abigail. For all of it. His words landed not as relief, but as a stone in my chest, heavy and cold. I'd wanted his apology, craved it in the shed when his truths tore me apart, but now it felt hollow, too late to mend what he'd shattered. I looked away, my gaze catching on a small photo by his bed. Diane young and smiling, her eyes, Nathan's eyes. My throat tightened, not with tears, but with a quiet, simmering ache. Joy stood touching my arm. He's been asking for you since they brought him in, she said, her voice gentle. Says he's got something for you. In his coat pocket. I nodded, moving to the chair where his coat hung, the fabric worn and heavy. Inside the pocket I found a folded letter, the paper soft from years of handling. Diane's handwriting again, but this time addressed to me. Abigail, it read. If you're reading this, you've seen Harold's pain. He's broken, but he loves Nathan. Thank you for saving my boy. I unfolded it fully, my hands steady, and saw a date 2 years before I'd met Nathan. Diane had known me somehow through Harold's stories, and her words felt like a plea from a ghost. I looked back at Harold, his breathing shallow, his eyes half closed. "You kept this all this time?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Why give it to me now?" He didn't answer, his chest rising slower, and Joyce's knitting resumed the clicks, a soft rhythm in the room. I slipped the letter into my pocket, its weight mingling with the necklaces, and sat by the window, the hospital's hum fading. Nathan's face from the port flashed in my mind, his silence louder than any fight, and now Harold's apology, Diane's letter, they were all threads of a story I'd never asked to be part of. My phone buzzed, a text from Nathan. "Can we talk? I need you." I stared at it, then set the phone face down, my heart still my strength, a quiet ember burning low but steady, as I watched Harold's chest rise and fall, waiting for the end of something I couldn't name. I woke to the sound of sparrows outside my bedroom window, their chirps sharp against the early November light filtering through the curtains. The house was quiet. No creaking chairs or ticking watches, just the soft hum of the heater kicking on. I lay still, my hand resting on the necklace Allison gave me, its pendant warm from my skin. The past week. Nathan's betrayal, Harold's hospital bed, Diane's letter felt like a storm that had passed, leaving me raw but standing. I wasn't the same Abigail who'd driven home expecting a Thanksgiving feast. I was someone new, and I was learning to live with her. I slipped out of bed, pulling on a sweater, and wandered to the kitchen. The counters were bare, but a bag of coffee sat by the sink, a gift from Joyce. I brewed a pot, the rich smell filling the room, and carried a mug outside to the porch. The air was crisp, the yard blanketed in fallen leaves, their colors muted but alive. I sat on the steps cradling the mug and watched a neighbor's kid ride a bike down the street, his laughter bright and unburdened. For the first time in days, I smiled, small but real, feeling the world move around me without pulling me under. I thought about the hospital, Harold's shallow breaths, his apology that hadn't fixed anything but had loosened something in me. I wasn't angry anymore, not at him, not even at Nathan. The hurt was still there, a quiet ache, but it didn't own me. I sipped the coffee, its bitterness grounding, and let my mind drift to the years I'd spent building a life with Nathan. The late-night talks, the shared dreams, the way I'd shaped myself to fit his world. I'd lost pieces of me in that, but out here with the leaves rustling, I could feel them coming back. My phone buzzed on the step beside me, a message from Joyce. "Family gathering tonight at my place. You're welcome, no pressure." I set the phone down, staring at the horizon where the trees met the sky. A gathering sounded warm but daunting, a step into a world I wasn't sure I belonged in anymore. Yet Joyce's kindness, her steady presence through this mess, tugged at me. I wanted to belong somewhere, not as Nathan's wife or Harold's test, but as me. I stood brushing leaves from my jeans and walked to the backyard where a patch of bare soil caught my eye. An idea sparked, simple but right. I grabbed a shovel from the shed, not the one filled with secrets, but a smaller one by the house, and started digging. The earth was cold resistant, but I worked steadily, my breath visible in the air. I'd plant something here, maybe a maple sapling, something that would grow long after I'd moved on. The act felt like a promise, not to anyone else but to myself. As I dug, my thoughts settled clear and unhurried. I wasn't running from the pain anymore, nor was I fighting it. I was living alongside it, letting it teach me. The hole deepened and I paused, leaning on the shovel, my hands sore but steady. The sparrows sang louder, their notes weaving through the morning, and I felt a quiet warmth, like the first step toward home. The afternoon sun hung low, painting the backyard in soft gold, as I smoothed the soil around the maple sapling I'd planted. My hands were caked with dirt, nails chipped, but the work felt honest, like a quiet conversation with myself. I stepped back, wiping sweat from my brow, and studied the small tree, its thin branches swaying in the breeze. It was fragile, but rooted a piece of hope I'd given to the earth. I smiled, my chest lighter, and turned toward the house, ready to face the evening. Inside, I showered and changed, slipping into a simple dress, the necklace Allison gave me catching the light as I moved. Joyce's invitation to her gathering lingered in my mind, and I decided to go not out of obligation, but because I wanted to feel the warmth of people again. I grabbed a bottle of wine from the pantry, a dusty gift from a forgotten party, and drove to her house, the streets familiar yet new, like I was seeing them through clearer eyes. Joyce's home glowed with string lights. The front door open, voices spilling out. I hesitated, clutching the bottle, then stepped inside. The living room was full neighbors. Cousins' faces I'd seen but never known. Joyce spotted me and pulled me into a hug, her warmth easing the knot in my stomach. "You made it," she said, her eyes kind. "Come eat. We've got plenty." I mingled the chatter washing over me, stories of kids and jobs and small-town life. No one asked about Nathan, and I was grateful letting myself be just Abigail, not the woman he'd left. I laughed at a joke, sipped wine, and felt a quiet belonging, like a thread weaving me into something larger. Allison arrived later, her smile tentative but real, and we sat on the couch, our knees touching, the distance between us shrinking with every word. "You look different," she said, her voice soft, studying me. Not lighter exactly, but steady. I nodded, swirling the wine in my glass. "I'm finding my way," I said. "It's slow, but it's mine." She squeezed my hand and we sat in silence, the room's warmth wrapping around us. Later, Joyce handed me a small book, its cover worn, pages yellowed. "Harold wanted you to have this," she said. "Found it in his things at the hospital. It's Diane's old recipe book. He said you'd know what to do with it." I took it, my fingers tracing the faded ink of Diane's name. The weight of it was gentle, not like the letters or the secrets, but a gift, a piece of a woman I'd never met but felt tied to. I thanked Joyce and slipped outside to her porch, the night cool and starry. I opened the book, flipping to a recipe for pecan pie. Diane's handwriting, neat, a small note in the margin, for the hard days. I closed my eyes, picturing her in a kitchen mixing dough, her heart heavy, but her hands steady. I drove home, the recipe book on the passenger seat, and sat in my driveway, the engine off, the quiet settling around me. I thought of the sapling, of Joyce's laughter, of Allison's hand in mine, the pain of Nathan's betrayal. Harold's games was still there, a shadow, but it didn't define me. I was building something new, not loud or grand, but real. I stepped out, the stars bright above, and walked to my door, my steps slow, my heart full, carrying the weight of a life I was ready to claim. I'm Abigail, 33 now, and my new apartment smells of fresh paint and coffee. It's small, just a one-bedroom in a quiet corner of Richmond, but every inch is mine. The walls hold my sketches, pencil lines of trees and rivers, things I draw when the world feels too loud. Mornings start with sunlight through the window, warming the wooden floor where I sit with a notebook, jotting thoughts that come slow and honest. It's been 6 months since that Thanksgiving, and I'm learning to live with the woman I've become. I moved out of the old house after Harold passed. His funeral was quiet, just me, Alice, and Joyce, and a few neighbors under a gray sky. I didn't cry, but I stood by his grave, Diane's recipe book in my bag, and whispered a goodbye to the man who'd broken me open. It wasn't forgiveness, not exactly, but a letting go, like setting down a stone I'd carried too long. The house sold quickly, and I used my share to start over, to build a space where I could breathe. My days have a rhythm now. I work at a local bookstore, shelving novels and chatting with customers about their favorite stories. It's simple, but the weight of their words, their quiet joys, grounds me. After my shift, I walk home through the park where kids chase kites and couples share picnic blankets. I used to envy that ease, but now I just watch content to be alone, my steps steady on the gravel path. Allison and I talk often, our calls filled with small updates, her new job, my latest drawing. She's closer now, living an hour away, and sometimes we meet for dinner, splitting a pizza and laughing over nothing. It's not the sisterhood I expected, but it's real, built on truths we've both faced. She doesn't mention Nathan, and I don't ask. His text stopped months ago, and I deleted his number one night, my fingers steady, my heart calm. I've started writing too, not just sketches, but stories. pieces of me poured onto pages. A local paper published one last month, a short tale about a woman finding her voice after loss. The byline, Abigail Walker, felt like a badge proof I was more than the pain I'd carried. Readers left comments, strangers who saw themselves in my words, and I read each one, my chest warm with a quiet pride. Evenings are my favorite. I cook simple meals, maybe pasta with herbs from a pot on my windowsill, and eat at a small table by the window. The city hums outside, but inside it's just me, a candle flickering its light dancing on the glass. I think about the old me, the one who planned Thanksgivings and trusted too easily, and I don't miss her. She was part of me, but this Abigail, the one who draws and writes and walks alone, is stronger, not because she's unbroken, but because she's learned to carry her cracks. The November air carries a chill now, and I've taken to evening walks along the river near my apartment where the water reflects the city's lights like scattered stars. My boots crunch on the path, steady and unhurried, and I pull my scarf tighter, feeling the quiet strength of being alone but not lonely. I pass a bench where an old man feeds pigeons, his hands slow, deliberate, and I think of Harold, not with anger but with a kind of understanding, a recognition of his own brokenness. I keep walking, my breath visible, and let the river's murmur guide my thoughts. I've been thinking about trust lately, not just in others, but in myself. That Thanksgiving when I found Nathan gone, I thought I'd lost everything, my marriage, my home, my sense of who I was. But standing in that empty house facing Harold's tests and Nathan's silence, I found something else, a resilience I didn't know I had. It wasn't loud or dramatic, not the kind of strength that shouts. It was quiet, like the river, steady even when the surface ripples. I learned to listen to it, to trust the part of me that kept going, that planted a tree, that wrote stories, that chose to start again. I stop by the water, leaning against a railing, and watch a leaf drift downstream, carried but not lost. That's the lesson, I think. Pain doesn't define you unless you let it. It's not about forgetting or winning. It's about choosing to move forward, not because you're whole, but because you're enough. I used to think I needed Nathan's love, Harold's approval, even Diane's ghost to make sense of my place. But I don't. I'm enough for myself, and that's a freedom I didn't know I could claim. I think of Allison rebuilding her own life, and Joyce who opened her home to me. I think of the readers who wrote to me, sharing their own cracks, their own rivers. We're all carrying something, aren't we? But we keep walking, finding moments of light and a laugh, a kind word, a quiet evening by the water. That's what I hold on to now, not the pain, but the small, real things that remind me I'm alive. I turn back toward home, my steps light the river's song fading behind me. My apartment waits warm and mine a space I've built from the ground up. I'll make tea tonight, maybe sketch the river's curve and sleep, knowing I'm not running from my past, but carrying it gently as part of who I am. The stars are out, faint but steady, and I feel a peace that's hard-won, a quiet that holds space for everything I've been and everything I'll become. What moment made you realize your own strength? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. It's these shared truths that connect us. If this journey resonated with you, please like and subscribe to join me in more stories of finding light in the dark. Share this with someone who might need it, someone walking their own path. Thank you for being here, for listening. Here's to healing, to quiet strength, and to the rivers that carry us forward.